The old janitor never imagined that walking through one unlocked door would cost him everything. For nearly 20 years, he had quietly cleaned the floors, emptied overflowing trash bins, polished glass walls before sunrise, and disappeared before most executives even arrived for work. Few people knew his name. Even fewer ever looked him in the eye. To the people occupying the luxurious offices above him, he was simply another member of the cleaning crew. Invisible, replaceable, easy to overlook. But on one ordinary morning, after a plumbing problem closed the employee's restroom, he stepped into the executive restroom for less than 5 minutes. That single decision set off a chain of events that would expose a secret buried for decades and force one of America's most powerful companies to confront a truth it had desperately tried to leave in the past. Security officers reached him before he had even returned his cleaning cart. Employees stopped in the middle of phone calls. Conversations faded into uneasy whispers as people watched the elderly man being escorted across the gleaming marble lobby. Someone quietly whispered, "He used the executive restroom." Another employee shook their head and replied, "He's lucky they're only firing him." The decision had already been made. Human Resources had approved his immediate termination. Company policy, they insisted, applied to everyone. The old janitor never argued. He didn't demand an explanation. He didn't plead for another chance. With calm hands, he unclipped the faded employee badge he had worn every working day for nearly 2 decades and placed it into the security supervisor's hand. His face showed no anger, only the quiet disappointment of someone who had learned long ago that dignity often survives even when respect does not. The executives quickly regained their composure. One of the board members stepped between them and cleared his throat, insisting there had to be some misunderstanding. According to company records, Daniel Brooks was simply a contract janitor hired many years earlier through a facilities management company. His personnel file contained nothing unusual, no executive background, no family connections, no indication that anyone inside the corporation had ever known him before his employment began. Yet the CEO ignored every word. He continued studying Daniel's face, noticing details that had escaped him during the first few seconds. The shape of his jaw, the small scar near his left eyebrow, even the way he folded his hands while standing still. They matched faded photographs he had seen countless times while growing up inside his grandfather's home. Photographs that had always raised questions no one in the family seemed willing to answer. As a child, whenever he pointed to the smiling young man in those pictures and asked who he was, the adults would quickly change the subject. Sometimes they claimed it was an old family friend. Other times they insisted the photographs had been mislabeled. Eventually, he stopped asking, believing the mystery would never be solved. Daniel could see those memories forming in the CEO's eyes. He let out a slow breath before quietly saying, "You have your grandfather's eyes." The sentence hit the CEO harder than anyone realized because almost no one outside his immediate family knew that his late grandfather had often been described that exact same way. The executives exchanged uneasy glances. One board member immediately interrupted, insisting security remove Daniel from the building before the situation attracted more attention. By now, however, attention was unavoidable. Employees had begun recording the scene on their phones. Messages were spreading across the company's internal chat system faster than management could delete them. Rumors multiplied by the minute. Some claimed the janitor had blackmailed the CEO. Others believed the elderly man suffered from dementia and had mistaken the executive for someone else. A few employees simply stood in silence, sensing they were watching the beginning of something much bigger than anyone understood. The board of directors had no choice but to acknowledge what the investigation revealed. Several members resigned after questions arose about why important records had been overlooked for so many years. Others admitted they had inherited stories from previous leadership without ever questioning whether those stories were true. The CEO, overwhelmed by everything he had learned, stood before every employee in the company's largest conference hall and offered an apology unlike any the corporation had ever issued. He admitted that titles, appearances, and assumptions had blinded the organization to the humanity of the people who kept it running. He confessed that while everyone celebrated quarterly profits and record-breaking growth, they had failed to recognize the dignity of those whose work often went unnoticed. Looking toward Daniel, He acknowledged that the greatest mistake wasn't made on the day the janitor entered the executive restroom. It had been made years earlier, when people decided that someone's position determined their worth. Many expected Daniel to demand control of the company or claim every privilege that came with his family's legacy. Instead, he surprised everyone once again. He declined the luxurious office that had been prepared for him. He refused the chauffeur, the private dining room, and every symbol of executive status that had once been denied to him. What he accepted was far simpler. He agreed to serve as a special advisor focused on improving the lives of employees at every level of the organization. His first recommendation was immediate and impossible to misunderstand. The company removed policies that separated executives from everyone else whenever they served no practical purpose. The executive-only restroom that had started the entire chain of events became accessible to all employees, standing as a quiet reminder that respect should never depend on a person's job title. New training programs emphasized empathy, fairness, and dignity, encouraging managers to know the people behind every employee badge instead of seeing only positions and payroll numbers. As months passed, Daniel became known throughout the company for something far more meaningful than his family connection. Every morning, he still arrived early. He still greeted security officers by name. He still stopped to speak with maintenance workers, receptionists, cafeteria staff, and interns. The only difference was that now the executives often joined those conversations. Employees who once hurried past him began sharing meals with him, asking about his life, his experiences, and the lessons he had learned through decades of quiet perseverance. Daniel never spoke with bitterness. He believed resentment would only steal the peace he had fought so hard to keep. Instead, he reminded everyone that kindness costs nothing, while judging someone by appearances can cost far more than anyone realizes. His story spread beyond the company, inspiring businesses across the country to re-examine the way they treated the people whose work often happened out of sight. In the end, this story was never really about a restroom, a company policy, or even an inheritance. It was about how easily people become invisible when others decide their uniform tells their entire story. Every person carries experiences, sacrifices, and chapters that cannot be seen from a distance. Sometimes the individual sweeping the floor has endured hardships the executive in the corner office could never imagine. Sometimes the quietest voice in the room carries the greatest truth. And sometimes, all it takes is one unexpected moment to expose years of assumptions and remind us that character will always matter more than status. If this story made you think differently about the people you encounter every day, let us know in the comments. Have you ever witnessed someone being judged because of their job, appearance, or circumstances, only to discover there was much more to their story? We'd love to hear your perspective. If you enjoyed this story and want more powerful, thought-provoking narratives like this one, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss our next story. Until next time, remember this: the greatest mistake we can make is believing we already know someone's worth before we've taken the time to know their story.